Tonight, we're starting at the very beginning, before Portugal, before the headlines, before the world knew their names. We begin in England, in a quiet village called Rothley, in Leicestershire. A place of stone houses, small streets, and everyday life moving gently on. This is where Kate McCann and Jerry McCann lived. A British couple, parents, professionals, neighbours, people who, at the time, lived a very ordinary life. They were both in the medical field. Kate worked as a GP, seeing patients, helping families, moving through long days at work. Jerry was a heart doctor, a consultant cardiologist, working in hospitals, concentrating on his career and his family. Their lives was busy, structured, and very familiar. Work during the day, home during the evening, time with the children. The kind of life many families recognise. At home in Rothley, they were raising their 3 children. Their eldest daughter, Madeleine McCann, a little girl, just 3 years old, and a younger twin brother and sister. Their home life was described as calm, family focused, and routine. Morning routines, work schedules, even meals, bedtime, the rhythm of normal life. Rothley itself was peaceful, a place where people knew each other, where neighbours passed on the streets, where nothing ever felt too far away. It was a kind of village where life felt steady, predictable, safe, and quiet. And for the McCann family, this was simply home. At this point in time, they were just another family. No headlines, no attention, no spotlight. Just parents, working, raising their children, planning the future. In 2007, they planned a trip, a holiday, a chance to step away from work, to relax, to spend time together in the sun. They travelled with friends, other families, other children. It was meant to be a break from routine. A simply family get-together. No one could have imagined how much that one trip would change everything. But for now, in this moment, they were still just a family living quietly in a village in England. And life felt completely normal. From the quiet streets of Rothley to the warm coast of southern Europe, the family arrived in a small seaside town in Portugal. And at first, everything felt calm. From the quiet streets of Rothley to the warm coastline of southern Europe, the McCann family arrived in Portugal. It was a spring of 2007, a peaceful time of the year, not too crowded, not too busy, just families, sunshine, and the gentle sound of the sea in the distance. Portugal was known as a calm holiday destination, a place where people came to relax, to slow down, to spend time together. White buildings, narrow streets, Restaurants filled with quiet conversation in the evenings. During the day, children played near the pools. Families walked along the promenade. Holidaymakers sat outside cafes, watching the world move slowly by. It felt safe, comfortable, familiar. Kate McCann and Jerry McCann were travelling with a small group of friends. Other couples, other families, other young children. People they trusted, people they knew well. It was a kind of holiday many families take together. Shared meals, evening walks, children playing during the day, sleeping soundly at night. They stayed in a holiday apartment close to the centre of the resort, not far from the restaurants, not far from the pools, not far from the gentle rhythm of holiday life. During the day, the children spent time outside, swimming, playing, laughing. Simple moments, the kind of memories families make on holiday. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann was there with them, alongside her younger twin brother and sister. Days passed quietly. Morning routines, breakfast together, time in the sun, afternoons that felt long and relaxed. There was no rush, no pressure, just a calm feeling of being away from home. In the evenings, the adults would sometimes gather for dinner nearby. A short walk from the apartments, a familiar place, a routine that began to feel normal. They would eat together, talk quietly, check on the children regularly. Everything felt safe. Everything felt normal. Everything felt close. Everything felt under control. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed out of place. It was simply a group of families enjoying a holiday in a peaceful seaside town. And as the days went by, the routine settled in. Day after day, morning to evening, evening to night, calm, warm, ordinary. Then one evening, like many evenings before it, the adults gathered for dinner again. The air was soft, the town was quiet, and the children were asleep in the apartment. At least, that is what everyone believed. As the days passed in Portugal, a routine began to form. Mornings in the sun, afternoons by the pool, evenings spent together. And most nights, the adults will gather for dinner. A familiar place, a short walk away, close enough to return to the apartment when needed. On this particular evening, everything began the same as it did before. The children were getting tired. The day had been long, full of warmth and activity. Back at the apartment, the younger children were settled into bed. 3 small beds, a quiet room, soft lighting, stillness. Madeleine McCann was asleep alongside her younger twin brother and sister. The apartment was calm, peaceful. Nearby, Kate McCann and Jay McCann joined their friends for dinner. The restaurant wasn't far, just a short walk away, close enough to return and check on the children regularly. And that's what they did. Throughout the evening, one of the adults would leave the table, walk back to the apartment, and quietly check inside, just to make sure everything was all right. It felt normal, a routine that had been followed on previous nights. Walk back, listen at the door, look in, see the children are sleeping, return to the table, again and again and again throughout the night. The night air was warm. Soft conversation filled the restaurant. People were eating, laughing quietly, enjoying the end of the day. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed out of place. Just another calm evening on holiday. Time passed slowly. Plates were cleared away. Drinks were poured. The town remained peaceful. And one by one, the routine of checking continued. A short walk, a quiet look inside, then back again. Everything still, everything calm. But as the evening moved on, one of those checks would feel different. Something small at first, a moment of confusion, a feeling that something wasn't quite right. The walk back to the apartment that night felt the same as all the others. The same path, the same quiet streets, the same gentle stillness in the air. But inside the apartment, something had changed. The walk back to the apartment felt the same as it had all evening. The streets were still, the air was warm, and everything outside seemed peaceful. Inside, it was quiet. Kate McCann entered the apartment. At first, nothing felt out of place. The lights were low. The room was still. The kind of silence you expect when children are sleeping. She moved gently so as not to wake them. A careful step, quiet glance towards the beds. Just another routine check. But something didn't feel right. A small detail. Hard to explain at first. The kind of moment where you pause and look again. She looks towards the bed where Madeleine McCann had been sleeping. And in that moment, there was confusion. A second look. A feeling that something was missing. The room was still. The twins were asleep. But Madeleine was not there. At first, it didn't make sense. A quick look around the room. A step toward the door. A glance behind furniture. A quiet call of her name. Nothing. That moment of realising something was wrong came slowly. Not all at once. A growing feeling. Confusion turning into worry. Worry turning into fear. Kate McCann moved quickly now, checking the room again, looking into the hallway, calling out softly, but the apartment remained quiet. Too quiet. She rushed back towards the restaurant, the short walk that had felt normal all evening, now felt different. Faster, heavier, urgent. When she reached the table, her voice broke the calm of night. Jane McCann and the others could see immediately. Something was wrong. The words came quickly. Madeleine was gone. At first, there was confusion. People stood up. Chairs moved. Questions were asked. Everyone trying to understand. Trying to make sense of what they were hearing. And the realisation began to spread. Something was very, very wrong. Very suddenly, the peaceful evening had changed. The group moved quickly back towards their apartment. The calm routine of earlier was gone. Now there was urgency. Voices calling softly. Footsteps moving faster. Doors opening. People looking into rooms. Looking outside. Calling her name. But the night stayed quiet. The streets stayed still. And the feeling of panic began to grow. From that moment on, everything changed. The quiet holiday town was about to wake up, and the search was about to begin. In the moments that followed, the apartment filled with people. Friends moving from room to room, looking carefully, calling her name softly, still hoping she might be hiding somewhere, still hoping there was a simple explanation. Jerry McCann began checking outside, the area around the apartment, the paths, the nearby corners, calling her name into the night. Quietly at first, and then louder. Kate McCann stayed close to the apartment, moving between the rooms, looking again and again, opening doors, checking spaces, looking where she had already looked. The kind of searching that comes from shock. When your mind is trying to understand what doesn't make sense. The other families began helping, splitting up, moving into the surrounding streets, looking near the pool area, walking along the pathways, voices calling her name gently into the warm night air. But there was no answer. The calm feeling that had filled Portugal earlier that evening was beginning to change. Lights started coming on in nearby apartments, doors opening, people stepping outside, asking what was happening. Something was wrong, and the word was beginning to spread. Staff at the resort were alerted. They joined the search, walking through the area, looking in quiet corners, checking spaces around the buildings. More people now, more movement, more voices, but still no sign. Time began to feel strange. Minutes passing slowly, but everything happening quickly. Footsteps moving back and forth. People trying to think, trying to stay calm, trying to believe she might be close by. Some searched the nearby roads, others checked around the edges of the resort, looking carefully, listening, stopping every few moments, just in case they heard something. But the night remained still. The feeling of panic was growing, not loud, not chaotic, just a deep, quiet fear. The kind that settles in slowly. As more people became aware, someone made the call for help. And soon, the local police were on their way. The search was no longer just friends and family. No, it was becoming something bigger, something more serious. The quiet holiday evening had turned into something else entirely. The streets were no longer silent. Lights stayed on. People stayed awake. And the search continued into the night. As the night continued and the first set of police turned up in Portugal, their presence changed the atmosphere. What had started as a frantic search among friends and family was now becoming an official investigation. They spoke calmly at first, asking questions, just trying to understand what had happened. Where was she last seen? Who had checked on the children? What time had everything felt normal? Each answer mattered. Every small detail was important. Kate McCann and Jay McCann tried to explain the evening routine, the checks on the apartment, the moment everything changed. It was still difficult to process. The shock hadn't settled yet. Everything felt fast and slow all at the same time. Officers began looking around the apartment, moving carefully, looking closely, checking doors, windows, the surrounding area. Outside, the search continued, now more organised. People spreading out further into the nearby streets, looking down pathways, checking dark corners, calling her name, listening and waiting. More officers arrived, more questions were asked. The night air, once calm and quiet, now carried a different feeling. A quiet urgency, a sense that something serious had happened. Neighbours stood outside, watching, listening, trying to understand. Some joined the search, walking slowly through the streets, looking carefully along the ground. Others stayed close to the apartments, just in case. Inside the apartment, time seemed to stand still. Outside, footsteps moved back and forth. Voices spoke softly, and the hours passed. At first, there was still hope. Hope that she might be nearby. Hope that she might be found quickly. Hope there was a simple explanation. But as the night grew later and the search continued, that hope began to feel more fragile. Still there, but quieter. The police continued working through the early hours, asking questions again, piecing together the timeline. trying to understand every moment of that evening. Because somewhere in those small details was the answer to what had happened. By the early hours of the morning, the peaceful holiday town was fully awake. Lights still on, people still searching, police still moving carefully through the area, and the story was only just beginning. As the night faded slowly, morning began to arrive in Portugal. The sky grew lighter, the streets became visible again, and the events of the night were no longer hidden in darkness. People who had been searching for hours were still outside, tired, quiet, moving slowly through the same areas again, looking carefully, checking every space, hoping to find something, anything at all. The town was waking up. Shop owners opening doors, residents stepping outside, holidaymakers beginning their day. But something felt different. There was tension in the air. A quiet awareness that something serious had happened overnight. Word began to spread. A child was missing. A little girl taken from her bed during the night. People spoke in low voices, asking questions, trying to understand. The search continued into the morning. Police moving through the streets, looking along pathways, checking nearby again in the daylight. Friends and volunteers helping where they could, walking slowly, scanning the ground, looking into places that had been dark just hours before. Inside the apartment, the reality was settling in. Kate McCann and Jerry McCann had barely slept. The shock of the night still fresh, the confusion still present. Time felt blurred. Moments passing without meaning. The questions continued. Officers returning, going over details again, trying to build a clear picture of the night before. Every movement, every check, every moment, piece by piece. As the morning went on, the search widened. More people joined. Locals, visitors, staff from nearby areas. Some walked along the edges of the town. Others searched open spaces, calling her name gently as they moved. And slowly the situation began to feel more real. This wasn't just a late night worry anymore. This was something much bigger. People began writing her name down, describing what she looked like, her age, her hair, her height. Small details shared again and again and again. Because now Everyone was trying to help. The peaceful rhythm of the holiday town had changed completely. The morning felt different. Quieter, heavier, and the search continued. As the hours passed, the story began to move beyond the town. What started as a local search was about to become something much larger, because soon people far beyond Portugal would begin to hear her name. As the morning turned into the afternoon, the search in Portugal continued. Police were still asking questions. People were still walking the streets. Small groups were still searching nearby areas. But now, the story was beginning to travel. At first, it was spoken quietly. A missing child, a little girl from England, gone during the night. Local conversations turned into local concern, and soon the first reports began to appear. News started spreading across Portugal. Short mentions at first, small reports, careful wording. A child missing from a holiday resort apartment. People reading the headlines slowly, trying to understand what had happened. Back in the UK, the story began to reach home. In places like Rothley, where the family lived, people were just beginning to hear the news. Neighbours, friends, people who knew the family. They listened quietly, trying to take it in. Trying to make sense of something so difficult to imagine. As the hours passed, more details began to appear. Her name, Madeleine McCann. Her age, 3 years old. Her photograph began to be shared. A small face, a familiar smile, and slowly people began to recognise her. The story began to move further, across the UK, across Europe, across televisions, newspapers and radio. People who had never been to Portugal, who had never heard of the town before, were now hearing her name. Back in Portugal, the search was still ongoing. Posters were being prepared, descriptions written down, her name repeated again and again, so people could remember, so people could look out, so people could help. In the UK, the news reached home during the day. People stopped for a moment. Parents looked at their own children, and quietly, they felt the weight of the story. What had begun as a quiet night in a holiday apartment was now becoming something much larger. A story that was crossing borders. A story that was reaching millions. And as the days moved forward, the attention only grew. The questions grew. And slowly, so did the theories. As more people heard the stories, more people began to wonder, to ask questions, to try and understand what might have happened that night. And this is where the first speculation began. As the days passed, the searches continued. People began to ask questions, quietly at first, then more often. In Portugal, the town was still moving, but it felt different now. People spoke in low voices, outside cafes, along the streets, inside shops. Everyone trying to understand how something like this could happen. Back in the UK, the same questions were being asked. In homes, at workplaces, in small conversations between friends. How could a child disappear from a place that felt so calm? How could a moment like that go unseen? With no clear answers yet, people began to wonder. Some believed she may have wandered away. Others thought someone may have taken her. And with each passing day, more ideas began to appear. Newspapers discussed possibilities. Television reports spoke carefully about different directions the investigation might take. Nothing certain, only questions, only theories. The name Madeleine McCann was now known across the world. And when people don't understand something, they try to make sense of it. They talk, they guess, they wonder. In the early days, there was still hope. Hope that she might be found nearby. Hope that someone might have seen something. Hope that one small detail might lead to answers. But as time moved forward and the story continued to grow, so did the speculation. Different ideas began to appear. Some discussed in the media, others shared quietly between people. Many of them uncertain, many of them never confirmed. This period was filled with waiting for news, waiting for updates, waiting for something that could explain what had happened. And during that waiting, the questions only grew. For the family, the focus remained the same. Finding her, holding on to hope, continuing the search. But outside of that, the world kept talking, trying to understand, trying to fill the unknown. As the case stayed in the news, and as more people followed the story, the attention grew even stronger. And soon, this became one of the most talked about cases anywhere in the world. As the days turned into weeks, the story continued to spread far beyond Portugal, across countries, across continents, across the world. The name Madeleine McCann was now known by millions. Her photograph appeared everywhere. On television screens, on newspaper pages, on posters held up in public places, a small face, recognised by people who had never met her. In the UK, the story felt extremely close. Back in Roughly, the quiet village where the family lived, people gathered, spoke softly, showed support in small ways. The streets felt different, quieter, more reflective. Across the country, people followed the news closely. Updates were shared daily. Each small detail, each possible sighting, each new development. People hoped. They watched. They waited. Posters were printed and shared. Her name, her picture, her description. Placed in airports, on notice boards, in shop windows, carried by people who wanted to help. The story reached further and further. Into homes, into conversations, into everyday life. People spoke about it at work, at school gates, in quiet moments at home. It became something that stayed in people's thoughts. The case was no longer just a local search. It had become international. Authorities in different places became aware. Information was shared. The search felt wider now, bigger. But even with all that attention, there were still no clear answers, and that silence began to feel heavier. For the families, the days must have felt endless. Time moving forward, but nothing feeling resolved. Still hoping, still waiting, still searching. And as the story continued, the questions continued too. People still wondering, still trying to understand, still looking for something that could explain what happened that night. As weeks turned into months, the early urgency slowly changed. The search continued, the investigations continued, but time began to pass. And with time came new developments, new leads, new directions. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation continued. In Portugal, the streets slowly returned to normal. Visitors came and went. Shops opened each morning. The sound of everyday life returned. But underneath that, the searches were still ongoing. Police continued to work through the details, going back over timelines, revisiting the apartment, speaking to people again, trying to understand every moment of that night. Every moment, every small detail, because sometimes answers are hidden in the smallest things. Reports came in from time to time. Possible sightings, small pieces of information, moments that seemed important. Each one followed carefully, each one taken seriously. Back in the UK, the story remained close to people's heart. In Roughly, support for the family continued. People left messages, held quiet gatherings, showed kindness in small ways. The village had not forgotten. And for Kate McCann and Jay McCann, life had completely changed. The routine they once had was gone. Now each day was focused on one thing: finding answers, holding on to hope, continuing the search. The investigation moved through different stages. Some leads felt promising, others slowly faded away. Questions were asked again, new directions were explored, different possibilities were covered, but nothing brought a clear ending. Time moved forward, seasons changed. The warm evenings of spring turned into heat of summer, then slowly into cooler days, and still the search continued. The case had become more than just a moment in time. It had become a long journey. One filled with waiting, with uncertainty, with hope that never completely faded. People across the world still followed the story, still remembered her face, still hoped that one day there would be answers. And as the years began to pass, the questions remained quietly unanswered. As time moved on, the story didn't disappear. It stayed in people's minds. It returned to the news again and again as new developments appeared and new searches began. As the years began to pass, life slowly continued in Portugal. Tourists still arrived, restaurants still opened, the sea still moved gently across the shore. To someone visiting for the first time, it would seem like any other peaceful town. But for those who remembered, the events of that night had never truly left. Time moved forward. Spring turned into summer, summer turned into autumn, autumn turned into winter, and then back again. The seasons changing again and again and again. Back in the UK and roughly, years were passing too, but the story remained close. People still remembered, still followed the news when updates appeared, still hoped that one day there might be answers. From time to time, the case returned to the headlines. New searches, new information, new leads being explored. Each one bringing a moment of attention back. A moment of hope. Investigators continued working over the years, revisiting old details, looking again at evidence, exploring different possibilities, because sometimes answers take time. Sometimes they take years. And during all of this, the name Madeleine McCann was never forgotten. Her photograph remained familiar, recognised across the world. A reminder of a story that never truly ended. For Kate McCann and Jay McCann, time moved forward too. Years passing. Days becoming months, months becoming years. But the focus remained the same. Continuing, remembering, holding on to hope. And every now and then, new developments would bring attention back again. People would pause and listen, read the updates, wondering if this might finally be the moment something become clearer. But as time went on, the story remained open, unresolved, still held in the thoughts of many. And in places like Portugal, the memory stayed in the background, quiet, but never completely gone. As the years passed, the case became something more than a moment in time. It became a memory that stayed with people. A story that many never forgot. And for some, it still feels like it only happened yesterday. As the years continued to pass, the story never truly faded away. In Portugal, life carried on. People walked the same streets, sat outside the same cafes, watched the sunset over the same sea. Too many visitors. It was just another peaceful coastal town. But for those who remembered, there was always a quiet feeling beneath it all. A memory that stayed. Back in the UK and roughly, the years moved forward too. The village remained quiet, the streets unchanged, the houses the same, the paths the same, but the story had become part of its history, something people truly never forgot. Across the world, people still remember the name Madeleine McCann, a small face that once appeared everywhere, on television, in newspapers, in homes. And even as time passed, it stayed in people's minds. There are some stories that never truly leaves. They settle quietly into memory, spoken about less often, but never gone. For many, this became one of those stories, one that people remember when they think back, one that still feels close, even after so many years. The questions remain, softly present, unanswered, but still remembered. In Portugal, the evenings still grew quietly. The air still turns warm as the sun goes down. The streets still become calm as night slowly settles in. And somewhere in that stillness, time keeps moving forward. Seasons continue to change. The sea continues to move gently along the shore. People come and go. Life continues as it always does. But some moments stay in place, held quietly in memory. And as the night grows calm again, the world slowly becomes still. The streets go quiet, the lights turn low, the story returns to silence. Tonight we began in a small village in England. We walked through warm evenings in Portugal, through the search, the waiting, the passing of time, and now we end it in the same way we began, with stillness. a story remembered, a moment in time, a name that many never forgot. And as the night settles in, everything grows quiet again. And somewhere, the sea still moves gently along the shore, as it did all of them years ago. Good night.